Okay, you've got your templates and your pattern printed out. Now I'm going to show you how to assemble your tiled pattern. I'm not going to show you the applique templates, I'm just going to show the pattern because you put them both together in the same way. So you're going to need your 12 pages of your applique pattern. You'll need some paper cutting scissors and some clear tape. What I recommend you do first is lay out all your pieces. If you don't do this, it can get more confusing as far as which parts you need to cut off and which parts you need to overlap. So when you lay it out, it's going to end up being rows of 4. You're going to have 3 rows of 4. I don't have quite enough room on my table here, so I'm just going to have that overlap a bit. So you're going to be looking for the blue number in the lower left corner. So I know that number 12 is the last piece in my lower right corner, so I'm going to put that one down there. It goes from left to right across the top, then you go from left to right again across the middle, and left to right across the bottom. So I ended with 4 over here. I'm going to put 5 over here on the far left in my next row, then 6, 7, 8, I might speed this up when I edit my video, 9, 10, 11. 11 I kind of left hidden behind this wash chain because I didn't want it to interrupt the lines there, but that is an 11, and then 12. Once you have it laid out, and I do have specific directions in your pattern instructions for which parts to cut off, on your top row, you are going to be cutting the paper on this side and the bottom. You want to cut so that you leave those red dashed lines and the green dashed lines on the page. So I just cut right to the outside of them, and you don't have to have a perfectly straight cut. You'll be okay. And so then I cut the bottom of this off so that I leave those green dashed lines on the page. That's what it'll look like when you're done. Pages 2 and 3, you'll cut the same way. Page 4, you don't have any red lines to the right side to cut off, but you will be cutting off, not red lines to cut off, but cut along. But you will be cutting off this little white margin below the green line. With your second row, you want to make sure you don't cut off this white part because the row above is going to overlap and you need a little something to tape your row 1 onto. But you will cut off here and also along the bottom on pages 5, 6, and 7. Page 8 is similar to page 1. There won't be anything to cut over here on this side. You're just going to cut the white margin off on the bottom. Then on page 9, you are not going to cut off anything from the top. You are going to cut off along this red line, cut that white margin out. 10, 11, you do the same thing. And then page 12, you don't cut any off of. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do the cutting and then I'll show you how I assemble it. Okay, let's take a look at how this tiled pattern goes together. I've got all of the white margins cut off that I needed to cut off. Work with your top row first. Do 1 row at a time. I am going to take pages 1 and 2, and I'm just going to slide these forward a bit so you can see what I'm doing a little better. You're going to see a green mark that extends across page 1 and into page 2. You want to make sure you're lining that up, and then also line your red line that you left on the page up with your red line on the next page. So the red line on page 1 in this case with the red line on page 2, and those should just butt up right against each other. If you didn't cut perfectly, then obviously they're not going to line up perfectly, but just do the best you can. And then for now, just stick 1 piece of tape on there because we might need to do a little bit of adjusting when we join our first row to the second. Go along and do that with the remainder of row 1, and then do the same thing with row 2 and row 3. So you'll assemble the rows first. I'm going to do that and then I will get back with you. Okay, I'm back. I've got my rows all taped together. Now I'm going to be taping my rows to each other. So my row 1 should overlap my row 2. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that these green lines that go vertically across page 1 and page 5 line up with each other. I'm paying attention to the areas where the lines of my design run across the pages to make sure that they line up. And then I'm also paying attention to the corners just to kind of make sure everything's lined up and square there. So again, I am still just going to use one piece of tape for now because things can get out of whack as you're moving along. And if you only use one tape, then it's easier to make adjustments. So I'll move along these 2 rows and just kind of line things up, make sure, check all those things that I mentioned, and then just stick a piece of tape between the 2 rows. I do it at that green line. I just noticed that isn't lined up perfectly, so I might end up adjusting that. It's up to you, how exact you feel like you need to be, but if you can just make sure that these lines line up, the best that they possibly can, that's going to make it easier when it comes to tracing it onto your background. So I'm going to finish taping my first row to my second row, and then my first and second rows to my third, and I will meet you back here when I'm done with that. Okay, I have my rows all taped together. So the final step is going to be just to tape everything down more securely. You might have a little bit, of bubbling and stuff that you need to maybe flatten out as you're taping down, just so you don't end up with wrinkles or creases. I actually tape all of my edges down, but you may not want to or need to. That's up to you, but I do want you to make sure you tape your corners securely down because those are likely to lift up and curl as the pattern gets moved around. I like to tape down all the edges though because it's pretty easy for something to snag in an area where you didn't put tape and then rip your pattern. You do what feels best to you, but make sure you get those corners nice and firmly taped down. And once you've got that done, your pattern is assembled and you are ready to trace it and start painting. That's going to be in my next lesson. We're done for today. I hope I've answered any questions you may have and that you're excited to get going. If you do have any questions, as I said, please do send me an email. My email address is amy@dappledthingsquilting.com. Let me show my face here so I can sign off and say goodbye. So signing off for today, I hope you're enjoying this so far, and next week I'll be sending you a new email. We're going to start tracing the pattern onto your background fabric, and we're going to be painting. I'm going to show you how to paint the no flow directly onto your fabric if you choose to do that. I do recommend it, even if your fabric doesn't bleed too much. It really does help, and there should be enough in that bottle for you to do that. And then we're going to start inking and painting. I'm excited. This is where it really gets fun. So I will see you next week. Bye everyone. Thanks for joining me.